Hey guys, it's Eric's What If, and welcome to What If Yuji Was Like Sinbad from Magi Part 4. Before we get this started, I just want to give a huge shout out to Purple for making my thumbnail or remaking it for me, as well as making my Benny Maru thumbnail that I'm going to make in the future. Yeah, he's a amazing guy. I'm thankful for him to making my thumbnails, and he also makes What Ifs himself, so go check him out. He'll be down in the description below. But yeah, without further ado, let's just get right into this. Instead of continuing right where we left off, we will head back quite a little bit, back to when Megami and Kugisaki had both been sent on their mission. They would have grouped with Nita, as she would begin to explain to them about their mission. She would tell them that a cursed womb, just like the one they had saw before at the juvenile detention center, had appeared once more. They were simply to do the same thing, investigate, because rumor had it that numerous people were disappearing. Children and faculty of the like. Since Gojo had been busy and Yuji was off on his other mission, those two were the only ones that were available. She would tell them that during this mission, if they are to encounter anything that's above them, they'd need to simply run. As Kugisaki would look at Megami, as Megami would have a stern look on his face, she would speak up asking Megami if he heard her or not. Megami would look towards Kugisaki saying that, yeah, he heard her. As he would be thinking in his own head, this could be his opportunity. He was never one to actually want to be a sorcerer. He was only doing this for his sister. It was completely pointless to him. However, ever since Yuji had been introduced to him and came into his life, something had been different about him. Yuji always knew what to do. Yuji was always in the forefront, and he always relied on Yuji to do things. But he didn't want to do that anymore. He had been training non-stop. He wanted to catch up to Yuji. He wanted to be someone like Yuji. It didn't matter who was in danger or what the danger was. Yuji would always step forward, and somehow, in the end, Yuji would always come out on top. Even as a Jujutsu sorcerer, where your life is not guaranteed, Yuji had always found a way, and it pissed off Megami deeply that he couldn't be like that. He always took the easy way out, even referring back to his training with Gojo, where Gojo would have told him that there's a huge difference between dying to win and risking death to win. Realizing that Yuji knew the importance and knew the difference entirely, he was going to strive to be better as a Jujutsu sorcerer and as a person as a whole. He would clench his fists as he would look at Nobara, telling her that he heard her. Nita would tell the two to be careful, seeing as the disappearances only happened at nighttime. There was no need for either of them to needlessly die. She would remind them once again, if they are to encounter anything that is above them, to simply run away. They don't have any other choice. It's either that or they die. As both of the freshmen would nod their head, as Nita would begin to place a veil over the school, as Nobara and Megami would walk in. And P.S. I know that she probably doesn't know how to cast a veil, but for this what if, I'm just going to let it slide. As they would walk towards the school, Nobara would grab Megami by the shoulder, telling him that they shouldn't be reckless and she doesn't know what's gotten into him. Lately, he's been down on the dumps, and she knows that's usually like Megami, but right now, he's simply too down in the dumps, and she doesn't know what he's thinking, believing that someone like her wouldn't notice something like that. Megami would shake his head, telling Nobara that everything was fine, and that they simply need to complete their mission. As Nobara would let go of Megami, telling him that she doesn't need him dying. She doesn't know what's getting into him or what's gotten into him, but he needs to cut it out. She knows that Megami is thinking of doing something stupid. She can see it all over his face, and she doesn't need him dying. She already gets scared, terrified that Yuji might curl over and die one day, and she doesn't need another idiot like that. Even though she thinks of Megami as simply a name face, he's still the more reasonable of the two, saying that all Yuji does is uses his face, and she hates guys that act like pretty boys. As Megami would have a confused look on his face, telling Nobara that he gets it, telling her to be quiet. He would then walk forward, telling Nobara to come on, and that they had a mission to complete. As the two of them would enter the school, as the entire area around them would completely shift, as once again they would be placed into an innate domain, as Nobara would freak out, saying that this is serious deja vu, as Megami would say, yeah, and he won't make the same mistake last time. He would summon his divine dog. He would tell the dog to stay in Kugisaki's shadow, telling it to watch over both of them. As the dog would bark, jumping inside of Kugisaki's shadow, Megami would then tell Kugisaki to come on. As they would continue walking forward, there would be numerous lower grade curses. However, they would not attack due to Megami's divine dog being out, as Kugisaki would say that this place was incredibly creepy, but Megami would question this, asking why were there so many special grade curse spirits popping up lately. He knows that Gojo said Yuji was an anomaly, and due to that fact, he knows that higher grade cursed spirits would be appearing. But wasn't this a little too many? During one of their first missions, Yuji had encountered a semi-grade 1 cursed spirit, and then he had already jumped up to special grade. And even after that, 2 more special grade cursed spirits had shown themselves. It was getting a little crazy. If Yuji's existence was disturbing the balance of the world this much, making it so cursed spirits that strong popped up, it would only make sense that all of them need to get abundantly stronger. However, it was still confusing. There were just so many special grades, and seeing as this is the same situation as the one they were in before, and a special grade had spawned in, he wouldn't hold it past anyone to say that there more than likely will be another special grade cursed spirit here, as Kugasagi would look over at Megami, having a sweat drop down her forehead, saying that once they confirm everything, they should just hurry up and leave. She knows Megami's pretty strong, but she doesn't think both of them are strong enough to take on a special grade, at least by themselves, as Megami would begin clenching his jaw. If he wasn't able to defeat a special grade, with all his time training here, even before Yuji came, he's completely worthless. There was no way someone like him couldn't do it. Even someone like Gojo told him that he has the potential to beat even him. So if Megami had the potential to beat Gojo, who could easily wipe out special grades, then Megami could do it as well. As they would be continuing to walk, they would make their way to a large gymnasium, as the floor below them would be almost transparent. However, they were both still able to walk on it. They would sit there confused for a second. However, Megami's dog would jump out the shadow and begin to bark, growling, as Megami would turn around, completely confused on the fact of why his dog was barking. There was nothing around, and he couldn't feel the cursed energy of anything either. Maybe it was because he was inside the innate domain, but he would simply tell Nobara to get on guard. There was something coming, as all of a sudden, both Megami and Nobara could feel rumbling beneath their feet. As Megami would look underneath him, as he would see a curse zipping through the floor beneath them, as it would begin to shoot up, as he would scream out to Nobara, pushing her to the side, as the curse would attempt to swallow Nobara whole, jumping up from the floor. He would be able to push Nobara out of the way in time, as they would both fall, as the curse would latch itself onto the ceiling, looking down at both Nobara and Megami, as Nobara would scream out to Megami saying that this thing was definitely special grade, as Megami would tell Nobara that he knows. It would be a humanoid looking curse, as it would have grayish like skin, with a larger head, with no face and sharp teeth, with a tail attached to its body. It would look down at Megami, as it would simply begin smiling, as it would lunge itself from the ceiling, jumping straight to Megami. As Megami would see this, he would roll back, making hand signs, summoning his giant serpent, as he would send it straight towards the cursed spirit. The cursed spirit wasn't expecting an attack like that, so it wouldn't be able to block or dodge, taking the attack head on, as Megami's snake would crash into the cursed spirit, biting it, slamming it back into the ceiling. However, the cursed spirit would simply let out a roar, as a transparent floor would then begin to flow like water. As Megami and Nobara would slightly begin to sink, there was still a bottom to the floor. However, the water was halfway up to their shins, as the water would spew up, crashing into the snake, slicing it into numerous different pieces, as the cursed spirit would hang from the ceiling, letting go as it would slam onto the ground, as the water would begin to wrap itself around the cursed spirit, as it would begin to smile once more, sprinting straight towards Megami. Megami would kiss his teeth, as Nobara would scream out to Megami, saying damn it, realizing that their only option right now was to fight. She would toss her nails into the air, as she would slam onto them with her hammer, sending them straight towards the curse, as Megami would be making hand signs, summoning Nue, making the shadow summon right at his feet, and as the cursed spirit would get right in front of him, he would let Nue fly, as it would burst from his shadow, striking the cursed spirit right in its chin, sending electric waves all throughout his body, as the curse would begin to scream out in pain, as Megami would realize that it made sense that the curse was weak to electricity. There was water all around them. It wasn't affecting him, and it was like this entire area was affecting the cursed spirit. Just as he would notice this, Nobara's nails would fly into the cursed spirit's back, as she would snap her fingers, screaming hairpin, causing a large gash to form on the cursed spirit's back, as it would blast forward, slamming into the walls of the gymnasium, as Megami would follow up, pointing at the cursed spirit, telling Nue to go, as it would fly towards the spirit, attempting to crash into it once more. However, the cursed spirit would quickly gather itself, sinking itself into the floor, as Megami would have a troubled look on his face. However, he would then tell Nue to go down and strike the water, as Nue would change directions, going straight down, attempting to crash into the water. However, the cursed spirit was already a step ahead, sending its water straight towards Niue, striking Niue straight through the chest, causing the shadow to have a hole go straight through its body, as it would be forcefully desummoned, as Megami would curse to himself. The curse just took out its only weakness that Megami was able to use. Was he in over his head? Did he put Kugasaki in danger simply due to the fact that he had something to prove? Was he going to lose his life here because he thought he could be just like Yuji? He thought he could be just like Gojo. The cursed spirit would then fly out of the water, head-butting Megami straight in the stomach, as Megami would cough up blood, being sent back straight towards Kugasaki, so it would send its water straight towards Megami. However, Kugasaki would push Megami out of the way, as it would stab her through the arm, as she would begin to wince in pain, telling Megami that he was an idiot, and she told him not to do anything stupid. He would look over at Kugasaki, cursing himself once again. He put her in danger. He was being stupid. He wanted to be just like Yuji, but he can't. He doesn't know how. He wants to be like Gojo, but he can't. As Nobara would scream out, telling Megami to get his head in the game. She refuses to die like this or have him die because he's not getting himself together. She doesn't know what's going on with him, but he needs to get it together. She doesn't know if he's trying to be like Yuji or Gojo, but he needs to cut it out. It's nothing like him. He needs to simply stick to being himself. That's what's helped all of them in every situation they've been in. Megami would look over at Nobara, seeing her arm once again and hearing the words that she had just told him. She was right. He's trying to be like Yuji, but he's not anything like Yuji. He understands he needs to get stronger and wants to get stronger, but he's trying to follow the path of someone who's completely different from him. The way he operates, the way he thinks, the way that he moves throughout his everyday life is completely different from Megami. Megami would make hand signs, as he would be about to summon Maharaga, as a cursed spirit would instinctively back up. As Megami would begin to laugh, he would tell Kugasaki that he was sorry. He put her in danger, and he was just thinking of doing the same thing again. He couldn't believe he was such an idiot. He would throw his hands up in the air, telling her that he's sorry for putting her in this situation, but he knows they'll get out of this. As he would begin to laugh again, as he would make hand signs, saying the words, domain expansion. He was going to push everything out. It didn't matter how ugly it was. It didn't matter how rough it was. He was simply just going to push it all out. As Megami's shadows would begin to flood over the place, causing the cursed spirit to shoot up from the water, as its innate domain would have been taken over by Megami's, as Megami would continue laughing, as something else would then click in Megami's head. He was confused, but he would begin to smile once more, saying that he couldn't believe it. He was helping him out, even in times like this. Even when he wasn't here, he had to admit it now. Yuji was absolutely amazing. He would rush towards the cursed spirit, as the cursed spirit would scream out, lunging straight towards Megami. Without its water, it wasn't as fast, so Megami was able to keep up. Megami wasn't the best in hand-to-hand combat, but due to his training over this time with Yuji and the other students, he had gotten a lot better. The cursed spirit would swing a right, as Megami would duck underneath it, sending an uppercut straight towards the curse's chin. As it would connect, the cursed spirit would fly upwards, as Megami would make hand signs, summoning his divine dog, as Niue and Giant Serpent would have been filtered into it, causing it to look like totality. However, it would have feathers all over its body like Niue, and its fangs and claws would be sharper, having poison coating them from the Giant Serpent, as he would send it straight towards the cursed spirit, as it would be insanely fast, sprinting straight towards the cursed spirit, slashing at its chest, as the cursed spirit would scream out once more. However, not only would it have been poisoned, electricity would have coursed throughout its body, causing the poison to have an even greater effect. However, Megami was not done. The cursed spirit would scream out as it would attempt to lunge straight towards Megami. However, one of Megami's toads would appear from the shadow, pulling him to the side, as a curse would attempt to hurriedly catch up to him, as it would be right in front of Megami once more, striking him, piercing straight through his stomach. However, the body that the cursed spirit had just struck would begin to melt as it would fall into the shadow, as Megami would be right behind the cursed spirit, sprinting at it. He would get right in front of the cursed spirit, cocking back his fist, as he would say he understands now. He knows what Gojo meant. He understands Yuji, why both of them are simply able to put their lives on the line and do things like this. Megami was never confident in his skills, but it was just something now that was letting him just do as he pleased. Everything felt perfect, as he would throw the punch as it would land on the cursed spirit's cheek, as the space around Megami and the cursed spirit would distort, as Megami would land a black flash, sending the cursed spirit flying, crashing into the wall once more, as Megami would have a huge smile on his face. He would then point towards the cursed spirit, telling Yuji that he thanks him, saying the words, Barara Keob, as Yuji's divine dog would begin to glow with electricity, as each feather on the dog would begin to shine bright, as it would launch itself towards the cursed spirit, driving itself straight through it, leaving a hole through the cursed spirit's chest. However, the divine dog will begin to rip the glowing feathers off its back as it would spin around, throwing them straight towards the cursed spirit, as they would pierce the cursed spirit, landing inside of it, as Megami would reach out, closing his hands into a fist, as a bolt of lightning would fly up from the cursed spirit, incinerating it, leaving not even a single trace behind. As Megami would take a deep breath, as a curse would be exercised, he would see one of Sukuna's fingers drop from it once again, as he would fall down to one knee, as Nobara would run over to him, asking if he was okay. Megami would simply smile, telling Nobara that he's even better than ever. She would look at him oddly, saying that it was weird for her to see him like that, but she's glad he's okay. But this would also shake something in Nobara. What just happened with Megami? He was able to defeat a special grade on his own while she sat there completely useless. She had felt the same thing Megami was feeling. She just wasn't feeling it as bad. But now seeing this, she knew that she was even further behind. Even with Yam, she knew that Yam was leagues stronger than her, and Yuji was even stronger than Yam. And seeing Megami take out the special grade here made her realize she was the weakest out of her group. She needs to get stronger. She doesn't want to sit around like she's been doing and letting everyone else do cleanup for her. However, Megami would turn to Nobara, looking at the face she was making. He would put his hand on her back, telling her that they'll all get stronger together and she doesn't need to worry about it. He knows exactly what she's thinking, but she has no need to worry. It would seem as if, even if they don't want to, they'll have to put their complete faith in Yuji. They'll both get stronger, as Nobara would nod her head, telling Megami, okay, as she would begin to place Megami's arm around her, helping him move, as he would pick up the Sukuna finger and make their way out of the school. As they would get outside, Nita would sit there screaming at them, telling them that she told them not to engage with the special grade. She knows that they were able to defeat it, however, it was reckless of them and they both could have died in there. Megami would apologize, as Kugasaki would do the same, saying that she's sorry for making her worry. As they would make their way back to the school, as the second they would get to school, Megami would see Gojo, as Gojo would wave to him, saying that he had just gotten back. However, Gojo would then stare at Megami again, scanning him, asking him how is that even possible, as Megami would be confused at first, with Gojo saying he could feel Yuji's cursed energy inside of Megami. However, it was like it was still Megami's own curse technique engraved into his soul. He could feel Yuji's cursed energy. It was odd, extremely odd. However, Gojo would simply chalk it up to it being something Yuji had unlocked once more. This is when Yuji would come back from his mission all beaten up and battered, as it would take him some time to recuperate. Gojo and Megami would walk in the room, as Yuji would have just barely woken up, still kind of dazed. He would ask both of them what they're doing in here, as Gojo would tell Yuji that he has a couple of questions for him. He would ask Yuji if he recalls letting Megami use his curse technique or something like that, as Yuji would have a confused look on his face, saying that he has no idea what Gojo is talking about. He doesn't even know if he's able to share his curse technique. As Gojo and Megami would look at each other with confused looks on their faces, Gojo would then ask Megami what does he thinks this means then. Megami would look down, saying that he had no idea, as Gojo would laugh once more, saying that maybe it had to do with the beings that Yuji had tamed. Maybe they were able to share their power, as Ball would seemingly appear by himself, saying that he saw the same spirit in Megami that he saw in Yuji. And since Yuji holds Megami dear, he's able to share a small portion of his power to Megami. He loves that fighting spirit in Megami, so it was only obvious that he was going to help him. he would look at Megami and tell him to not lose that fighting spirit. Ball finds that commendable of Megami, and he's happy he finally came to his senses. He would tell Megami to trust in the power that he has inside of himself, and he will only grow stronger from here, as he would seemingly dissipate once more, turning into the butterflies, as they would flow right into Megami. As Megami would have a sigil be placed on his hand, as Megami would look down at the palm of his hands, smiling, looking over at Yuji, telling him to get better soon, as Gojo would laugh, saying that this was all pretty amazing, as Gojo would apologize to Yuji, telling him that he'll let him rest now. As they would begin walking out of the room, as they would be leaving, they would see Yam attempting to enter the room, as she would have a troubled look on her face. Megami would ask Yam what was wrong. However, she would simply say that she doesn't want to be weak anymore. She would say that Yuji was always saving her. He was always saving all of them. She doesn't want to be weak. She wants to be able to save Yuji just as he's been saving them. As Megami would smile, and so would Gojo, as Gojo would realize all of his freshmen have the same ideals. They all strive to be stronger due to the fact that Yuji himself was strong. As Gojo would think to himself that he was completely right about Yuji, and from now on, Yuji would have 100% of his support no matter what. Yuji will be able to take the next generation up to levels he wouldn't have even thought of. Gojo would simply smile harder as he would stare at Yuji, telling him that he's happy he exists and he's completely proud of him. As Gojo and Megami would walk out of the room, with Megami telling Yam that they'll all get stronger. And this is when everything else would happen. Yuji would unlock his other Jin, as Gojo would tell all the freshmen that they will be training for the next 2 months to prepare for the Kyoto Goodwill event. As time would pass, Yuji would have eventually got another vessel for his other Jin, this being a necklace with a feather on it. Focalor would praise Yuji for having such a flashy vessel for him to dwell in. As for the next 2 months, Yuji would be training with Gojo and the other freshmen, completely mastering Ball and learning how to use the abilities of his brand new Jin, with all the other students training vigorously as well, until eventually the day would come where Gojo would gather all of the students, telling them that it was time. The Kyoto Goodwill event will be beginning really soon. He would tell them that they only have a couple of days left, as in the meantime, he had something to do, and he wanted them to continue their training until the day of. And he was going to be back just before, so he would tell them to simply keep at their training. During this time, Megami and Yuji would be training together, as Megami was trying to get better with his hand-to-hand combat, seeing as it was something he was lacking. He relied on his curse technique a little too much, and knew that in a battle that would push him to his limits, he knew that more than likely he would have to rely on his hand-to-hand combat than his Shikigami. However, from the side of both Megami and Yuji, they would hear someone say, "Well, what do we have here?" As everyone would look over, as Maki would kiss her teeth, asking why was he even here. As Mai would open her mouth, saying that she's really one to talk, as Maki would roll her eyes, with Nobara and Yam asking Maki who those two even were, where Maki would introduce the two, saying that the beefy looking idiot, his name was Todo, and the other one was her sister Mai. As both Yam and Nobara would be shocked hearing that. They didn't know Maki had a sister. As Todo would scream out, saying yes, let's just forget the formalities. He's heard a lot about this Yuji kid, but he has one question that he wants to ask him the most. What type of woman did he like? As the entire area would go silent, as Mai would put her hand over her face, shaking her head, realizing that Todo was still just an idiot. As Yuji would look at Todo straight in the face and tell him the same answer that he gave him in canon. A tall woman with a big ass. Todo would sit there in awe, staring at Yuji, as he would begin to cry. He would walk forward, as he would attempt to hug Yuji, but Yuji would push him out of the way, asking him what he was doing. As Todo would tell Yuji that it was only natural for him to hug his best friend. Yuji would look over, staring at Megami, as Megami would shrug his shoulders, as Yuji would simply laugh, giving Todo a hug back. Todo would smile and laugh, saying that he couldn't believe his brother has been here this whole time. As his grip on Yuji would get tighter, as Yuji would be confused for a second, as Todo would say that even though they have so much in common and he's his best friend, he's heard a lot about him, and he wants to see if what everyone is saying is true. The vessel of Sukuna, plus he survived and even defeated special grades on his own. There was no way Todo was going to let this opportunity slip by him, as he would pick Yuji up, attempting to slam him as he would bend backwards, slamming Yuji into the ground, catching Yuji off guard, as Yuji would be flung into the floor, as Megami would make hand signs, telling Todo that they weren't supposed to be fighting yet anyway. However, Yuji would tell Megami not to worry, as he would get up off the floor, brushing the dirt off himself, as Todo would look on at Yuji smiling, saying that, of course, there was no way his best friend would be taken down by something like that. He would begin to laugh, as he would rush forward at Yuji, attempting to swing. However, Yuji was a lot quicker than Todo, ducking underneath the attack, as he would spin his body, sending a kick straight towards Todo's face, connecting with Todo's chin, making Todo twist, as Todo would smile even harder, thinking to himself that his best friend was absolutely amazing. As Mai would look on in amazement as well. She couldn't believe this freshman was taking on Todo like it was nothing, as Yuji would be attempting to rush in at Todo once more. However, he would hear a clap as Yuji would swing his fist, but he would hit nothing, as he would trip and fall on the floor, as Todo would tell him that he wishes he could fight him to his full extent right now, but Takada was doing a meet and greet, and he refused to miss this for the world. He would tell Yuji that he would give him his full attention at the Goodwill event, and that he expects great things out of his best friend, blowing a kiss towards Yuji as he would begin to walk off, as Yuji would sit there with a disgusted look on his face, looking at Megami once again, as Megami would shrug his shoulders once more. Yuji would take a deep breath, saying that was weird, as Megami would say, tell him about it. As the few days would pass, where it would eventually lead to the Kyoto Goodwill event, where each student would begin to meet each other, with Principal Gakuganji still planning out the mission to attempt to take down Yuji, telling the Kyoto students that their sole mission was to kill Yuji, as he was Sukuna's vessel and he was dangerous. But Todo would scream out to the group, telling them that he refuses to partake in something like that, especially not something that involves his best friend. And if any of them were to get in his way, he would kill them. As Kama would look at Todo, calling him an idiot, as the Tokyo students would begin planning out what they were going to do for the Goodwill event. They would basically come up with the same plan as they did in canon, where Yuji would for sure take on Todo and the rest of them would spread out, attempting to take on the other students, as well as taking out any cursed spirits that they see. As the group would finalize on their plans, Megami would tell Yuji not to lose to someone like Todo. He's too strong for that, as Yuji would laugh, saying that he'll guarantee them the win. As the entire Tokyo school would get themselves ready, as the bell would sound off, as all of the students would head immediately into the forest, as just as they assumed, Todo came straight for Yuji. Todo would be screaming Yuji's name, sprinting forward as he would cock back his fist, rocketing a punch straight towards Yuji, as Yuji would jump over the attack, kneeing Todo straight in the face, as all the other students would go on their own way. Todo would take the knee head on as he would grab Yuji by the waist, beginning to slam him towards the ground once more. However, before Todo had the chance, Yuji would lock his legs around Todo's head, swinging his body as he would bend backwards, reversing Todo's slam, beginning to slam him instead. As Todo would crash into the ground, he would only laugh, saying that his best friend was absolutely amazing. He knew from their small interaction before that Yuji was something different, and this would only confirm that, as Todo would immediately get back up, throwing another punch straight towards Yuji. As he would throw a left hook, Yuji would block the attack, grabbing onto Todo's arm, pulling him forward, and sending 3 quick jabs to Todo's face. As Todo would attempt to counter, however, Yuji was simply too fast, ducking around the attack, spinning around Todo, sending a kick straight into his back, sending him face first into some trees. As Yuji would pull out his blade, pointing it straight towards Todo, saying the words Bararak, as lightning would begin to generate throughout his hand, sending a bolt of electricity straight towards Todo as it would crash into him, as Todo would begin smiling even harder, laughing through the pain, as a miniature explosion would then happen. As the smoke would clear, Todo would be standing there, telling Yuji that he promised him that he was going to go all out, so he hopes Yuji can take this at least. Yuji would be absolutely confused on how this guy was tanking everything. However, even though it looked as if Todo was taking everything to the face, he had actually accumulated quite a bit of damage. Toto would rush forward once more as Yuji would prepare himself. However, just as Toto would be in front of Yuji, he would hear a clap as Toto would swing his fist backwards, connecting with Yuji's face, as Toto would have ended up behind Yuji, swapping places with him. Yuji would have a confused look on his face as he would turn around, attempting to swing at Toto again. However, he would hear a clap once more as he would miss his punch, as Toto would send a kick straight towards Yuji's ribs, as this would cause Yuji to cough up some spit, sending him rolling, as he would crash into the ground, holding onto his side, saying that hurt like hell. He would ask himself, was this Toto's curse technique? If so, it was extremely confusing. As just then, an arrow would go whizzing right past Yuji's face, as he would jump up, looking around, wondering who had shot the arrow. However, just then, Yuji would see a butterfly passing by him as he would turn his head, seeing Mai getting ready to shoot him. Mai would pull the trigger as Yuji would just barely be able to dodge out of the way in time. As he would stumble backwards, he would notice Miwa was sitting there with her simple domain active. As he would enter the barrier, she would swing her sword. However, Yuji would be able to flip over it, barely catching himself in time. As he would land on the ground, he would notice himself completely surrounded by the Kyoto students, as a frown would begin to form on his face, asking everyone what the hell was going on, as Noritoshi would tell Yuji to be quiet and simply to accept his death. Yuji would have a questioned look on his face as he would ask Noritoshi what the hell is he talking about. If he expects him to just sit here and die, he's got another thing coming, as Noritoshi would tell Yuji that he'll see about that, as he would send an arrow straight towards Yuji once more. However, everyone would then hear a clap as Noritoshi and Yuji would swap places, with Toto running straight towards Noritoshi, sending a punch as he would jump out of the way, with Toto telling all of them to get out of here and that he told them he'll kill all of them if they stood in his way. Yuji would sit there confused, not knowing what was going on, as Noritoshi would kiss his teeth, telling Toto that he was an idiot and they had a mission to complete. Toto, however, would tell the group that he had no mission to complete and that they were getting in his way, and he told all of them what would happen if they did. Noritoshi would kiss his teeth once more as he would tell all the other Kyoto students that they would simply be taking their leave. As Toto would continue telling all of them off, Yuji would drop down from the tree, asking Toto what all that was even about, as he would tell Yuji to not worry about them and to continue their fight. As from suddenly, inside the faculty room, every single last one of the talismans that were hung up would begin to burn red, as all of the staff would look over, with Gojo smiling, saying that as much as he wants to believe that Yuji was probably able to defeat all the curses like that, he doesn't think that is the case. As at the same time, the faculty would also notice that a veil was being dropped over the Goodwill event. The staff would hurriedly attempt to try to make it in time. However, it would be dropped just before they were able to get there, as Gojo would attempt to walk into the barrier. However, it would block him from entering, but the other staff were able to get in freely. Gojo would laugh and say that whoever did this was a complete idiot. It didn't matter if Gojo wasn't able to get inside. They still had to account for Yuji, as well as all of his other students, who were a lot stronger than they were 2 months ago. However, the one thing Gojo did not account for was the fact that there would be numerous special grades, and not just 1 or 2. Kinjaku had been planning this for a minute. He was gathering as many special grade curses as he could, gathering as many allies as he could, completing promises, all for this one moment. He needed Yuji's morale to be at its lowest. He needed to figure out a way to be able to release Sukuna in order to try to make a binding vow with him. But at the same time, he also wanted to gather the items that were inside of the Jujutsu High inventory. Even if they weren't able to create the binding vow with Sukuna now, they would still have something else up their sleeve. It was a win-win either way. So as the veil would fall over, Toto and Yuji would still be fighting. However, from the side of Yuji, he would hear a voice tell him that it's been a while and that he's been wanting to fight Yuji again ever since the first time. As Yuji would turn to the side, Judaro would be standing there, transmutating the air between himself and Yuji. As Yuji's eyes would open wide, as he would throw up his hands, attempting to block any attack, as Judaro would send out a heavy blast of gravity straight towards Yuji. But before it could even touch Yuji, everyone would hear a clap as Judar and Yuji would switch places, with Judar taking his own attack head on, as it would send him barreling into some trees. As Toto would ask Yuji if he was alright, with Yuji being confused once more, nodding his head, saying that he was fine. Toto would tell Yuji that he has no idea what's going on, but it would seem someone is after his head. He would look at Yuji and ask him, does he trust him? As Yuji would look at Toto, as Toto would have a stern look on his face. Yuji would close his eyes and shake his head as he would begin to crack his knuckles, telling Toto that he trusts him 100%. As Toto would say, good, now make sure you keep up. As Toto and Yuji would both sprint forward, going straight towards Judar, as Judar would grab himself out of the rubble, beginning to fly in the air, going straight towards Yuji once more, saying that he doesn't know what he did, but he doesn't care. He's going to kill him now. As Judar would begin transmutating the air around him once more, creating 2 large fireballs and sending them straight towards Yuji. As Toto would scream out to Yuji, saying now, as Yuji would jump through the air, sending a drop kick, as Judar would be confused, wondering what the hell Yuji was even doing. As Toto would clap, making it so Yuji had swapped places with one of Judar's fireballs. As Judar would begin to laugh, as Yuji's fist would begin to connect with his face, causing Judar to be sent backwards once more, as he would get up once more, screaming, telling Toto that he was annoying, and that since he wants to be in the way, he'll be the one that's going to die first. As Toto would smile, telling Judar to bring it, Judar would then begin transmutating the air around him, as he would begin to create a spear of ice. As the cursed energy around Judar would begin to grow even more powerful, as Judar would continue concentrating, pouring more cursed energy into the spear, as the density around the spear would begin to get stronger, as he would tell Toto to try to dodge this one, sending the spear straight towards Toto. Yuji could feel it, however, the large amount of malice that was created using that spear. Toto would be about to clap, however, Yuji would scream out to him as he would rush forward, pushing Toto out of the way. As Yuji would attempt to dodge, however, the spear would begin to pull him in, as Yuji, just barely being able to stop himself, would have been struck in his arm, as the spear would have completely taken off his right arm, as Yuji would wince in pain, screaming out, as Toto would sit there asking Yuji what he was doing and why he did that, as Yuji would tell Toto that that spear would have got to him before he was able to clap in time. He trusts Toto 100%, however, he knew for a fact that that attack would have killed him. As Judar would begin to laugh, telling Toto that he was lucky Yuji was smart enough to realize it, otherwise he'd just be a pile of flesh on the floor. As Yuji would begin to tear off his shirt, using it to tie his arm up. It was only the beginning of the battle, but he was already down an arm. He didn't know if he'll be able to defeat Judar here. He wasn't able to do it last time, but he was stronger now, but he was still missing an arm. He would kiss his teeth, as Toto would tell him not to worry. Toto won't fall for the same attack twice. He would tell Yuji to simply trust him, as Yuji would nod his head, gritting his teeth, standing back up, as Toto and Yuji would begin rushing forward once more, as Toto would continue to clap over and over, swapping himself and Yuji, as Judar would begin to laugh, saying that this was fun. He would fly forward, attempting to crash into Toto to get him out of here. However, Yuji would swap places with Toto, sending a kick, attempting to strike Judar in the face once more. However, Judar would stop his momentum just before the kick, as Yuji would just barely miss, as Judar would say the words, downpour, as the air around him would transmutate, as black lightning would begin to form above Judar's head. Just as it would be about to crash down, a clap would be heard, swapping Yuji out of the way, as Judar would continue to rush forward, heading straight towards Yuji once more. As Yuji would cock back his left fist, he would send the punch, as Judar would fly over Yuji, laughing at him, calling him weak. As he would begin to fly straight towards Toto, Yuji would cock back his fist once more, as Judar would begin to laugh. He would transmutate the air around him once again, creating more black lightning. As Toto would clap, swapping himself with Yuji, as Judar would say he knew it, sending the lightning straight towards Yuji, as Yuji would say the words, Gen equip, equipping ball, as Yuji would throw the punch, dissipating the lightning that Judar had thrown, as well as connecting his punch onto Judar's face, causing electricity to flow throughout Judar's body, sending him flying, slamming into a tree, as Yuji would breathe out, as he would point forward, saying the words, Baradak Saika, as a thundercloud would appear above Yuji, sending a bolt of lightning straight down, striking Judar over and over, as Yuji would continue to say the words, Baradak Saika, over and over, as Toto would watch on in horror, as at the same time, Toto would begin to see dark butterflies begin to flow off of Yuji, as Yudara would begin screaming at the top of his lungs, screaming from pain. But Yuji wouldn't stop. He would continue to say the words Bararak Psycho over and over and over, until eventually Yuji would feel another cursed presence nearby as he would turn his head, seeing a branch grab onto Yudara, pulling him towards them. As Hanami would speak out, telling Yudara that he was an idiot for going in alone, and that they were told to stick together, as Yudara would just barely be conscious, laughing at Hanami, saying that she didn't understand because she was a curse. The thrill of battle is something only people like him and true sorcerers can understand. Even if he were to die here, none of it was going to matter. As long as he was fulfilled, as long as his boredom went away, he did not care. He was promised Yuji thousands of years ago, so he doesn't mind if Yuji is the one to kill him. As Yuji would sit there puzzled once more, who the hell was Yudar? Why was he after him so much? Why did Yudar call him a king last time? There are so many questions he has, yet none of them ever get answered. Yuji was getting sick of this. Yuji would then speak up, screaming out to Yudar. He would ask Yudar, what the hell is his purpose here? What does he even want with Yuji? Why is everyone so fixated on Yuji? All Yuji wanted to do was live a normal life with his grandfather, yet that couldn't even happen. So why? As Yudar would smile, looking Yuji straight in the eye, telling him that he just happened to be an extremely unlucky person. He would begin to tell Yuji that he is the reincarnation of someone that Yudar hated, but the last time Yudar attempted to fight him, he was left at death's door, and 1,000 years later, he was finally going to be able to get his revenge. As this would piss Yuji off, as Yuji would scream out telling Yudar that he's upset simply because he lost a match to someone 1,000 years ago. It has nothing to do with him. As Yudar would say, but it has everything to do with Yuji. He would tell Yuji that his birth itself means so much more than Yuji thinks it does. He would tell Yuji that, just as he said once more, everything has happened for a reason. It's all fate. Your birth was fated to happen when it did. Your grandfather was destined to die when he did, so you were going to be able to unlock your cursed energy. Your life will eventually lead to everybody's downfall, the end of the world, and bringing back the golden age of Jujutsu. It all starts with you. As Yuji would sit there with a confused look on his face. The end of the world? The golden age of Jujutsu? What the hell is he talking about? As Yuji would look up at Yudar, telling him that he was born into this world to save as many people as he could. As Yudar would laugh out, saying that that's what the other guy said too. As Hanami would speak up, telling Yudar that they should get this done and over with. As Yudar would smile, telling Hanami that she was right. As he would look towards Yuji, saying that was enough talking, and that they'll simply continue what they were doing before. As from the side, Megami would scream out the words, Bararak Kelb, as Totality would rush forward with a bright blue glow, running straight towards Hanami, creating a large gash, cutting off one of Hanami's arms. As Megami would touch down, regrouping with Yuji, saying that he was glad he made it in time. As Megami would make hand signs, summoning Round Deer. As this would surprise Yuji, he knew that Megami was on the cusp of figuring this out, but to think he figured it out, he would smile, thanking Megami, as Round Deer would begin to heal Yuji, healing his whole arm back, although it took quite a bit of cursed energy out of Megami to do so. Megami would apologize to Yuji for being late, however, they were going to take these guys down right here and right now, as Yuji would get up, with Toto walking in behind them, as he would nod his head, saying, alright, let's get this done.